Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bring Myself and God channel where I'm bringing you all things free and all things God. And welcome back to our regularly scheduled programming. I've been going live a lot lately, so this is my first pre-recorded video in a while and I'm excited to share it with you all. The topic of today's video is my journey to becoming a pro-Black activist. And the reason why I'm covering this topic in this video is because I've been going live a lot lately, especially for Black History Month. I've gone live a couple times and really touched on some important topics like Black love, Blackness, God, and justice. And for people who already know me, this is perfectly normal. But for people who may only know me through my YouTube channel, that might be the first time that you even heard me go so hard about social justice issues and Black issues, because that just hasn't been some of the topics of my other videos. But it's a huge part of my life, and it's something that I've definitely wanted to cover on my channel since I started it. And so this video is long overdue, and I just want to tell y'all about my journey to getting to this point. How did I become so passionate about my Black identity and justice for Black people and racial justice and social justice? Let me let you know. I'm gonna basically start with my upbringing, being originally from Detroit. I'm gonna tell y'all about my experience at Princeton University, where I did undergrad, which was a huge part of my development into this kind of pro-Black activist that I am today. And I'll tell y'all kind of where I'm at now and what my future goals are and the role that God's played in that, because y'all know this is the Bring Myself and God channel. And so God is still in everything I do. So we got a lot to cover. So without further ado, I'm just gonna jump right into it. So I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. That is where I lived kind of the first part of my childhood. That's where I have my earliest memories of playing outside till the street lights come on, and hanging out with other kids on the block and asking if people can come and play, and going to my all Black schools and all those types of things. And the reason I bring that up is because when I was in that space, Detroit being a really Black city, it wasn't like race was a huge thing for me, because everybody was Black around me for the most part. But when I was 8 or 9 years old, my family moved out of the city into the suburbs. We moved to Farmington Hills, Michigan, a suburb about 20 minutes outside of Detroit. Very short drive, very big difference when you cross 8 Mile. People from Detroit know 8 Mile is a dividing line. Very big difference when you cross 8 Mile. Moved over to Farmington Hills and just saw a lot of differences, things that I didn't necessarily know how to give language to at the time, but things that were definitely differences in my life, like the fact that when I lived in Detroit, my mom didn't want to let me play more than 5 houses down or anywhere where she couldn't see me. But when we moved to Farmington Hills, she let me and my brother walk to school, a full 4 blocks, no issue, because the neighborhood was just that safe. I remember the difference between going to private school when I was in Detroit and going to public school was when I was in Farmington Hills, because the public schools were better resourced and they had more to offer students compared to some of the schools in Detroit that were unfortunately really underfunded. And so that was a huge consideration for my parents. And so just moving to a place that had a lot more opportunity, but still being really very connected to the city, because we were always back and forth. Family was still in Detroit, grandma, uncles, cousins, church, Girl Scouts, you name it, we were back and forth to the city. And so that was still like a second home base for us. And so going back and forth, even as a young girl, I noticed some of those differences in the communities. Then you have me in my new classrooms where I'm the only Black girl in my class. And that's definitely a different experience. It wasn't a super racist place or anything like that, but just the difference of being around a lot of people who did not look like me. I started to assimilate a lot into culture, the people around me. I started talking a lot more like the white kids and hanging out with them, because that's all there was. I mean, I had my one best friend who was Black and we were like inseparable. But other than that, I really had to learn how to find my way socially in a very white place until I got to middle school, where a lot more Black kids started moving in from Detroit and we had our whole little crew. We had a critical mass of Black folks in my school, and then that's when we started to cut up, and I stopped feeling like I had to kind of blend in with people that were not like me, and I got to just kind of hang out with people who had similar backgrounds with our family and culture and understood the references and knew the dances. We were doing the stanky leg in the hallway and cutting up at the school dances when they're playing all the 2000s jams. It was great, but I was still super open to everybody, and that's how I was from middle into high school, just super open to everybody, cool with everybody, even though my crew was kind of like Black people. Especially in high school, I definitely was still very much having to be socially connected to people of all backgrounds, because I was in a lot of AP and honors classes. Black kids were not really as much in those classes with me. So I was making friends with everybody. I was kind of the person that was cool with everybody in school, but definitely kind of my social circle was grounded with the Black kids. That's who I hung out with. Even though I was very much, socializing with Black people, I wasn't necessarily as aware of racial issues as I am now. I definitely learned about things like slavery in middle school. But it's one thing to learn about the past, and it's another thing to know how these systems are impacting the present, right? I didn't have that systemic analysis. I just kind of had an understanding of the importance of diversity and the importance of not stereotyping people. Those are the types of things that I worked on in school. I was a part of this club in high school that worked to try to get people to not, use stereotypes and segregate and, treat people differently because of their background. And so I was definitely involved in race issues, but it was definitely more with a focus on diversity and acceptance and integration and all those things. To be fair, I did start to get a little bit more awakened before going to college, because I had some experiences with racism, especially my senior year of high school, that definitely woke me up a little bit. But it was still more around the issue of stereotypes and things like that. And my mindset then was oh, everybody's an individual. Don't, assume things about me because I'm Black and yada yada. And now I'm look, I'm blackety black. You should know some things about me because I'm Black, and I don't want people to not see my color. So it's a little different. I had learned about Oscar Grant in high school when I went and saw Fruitvale Station. I had learned about the case of KJ Johnson down in Florida. So there were things that I was learning about that were starting to wake me up for sure. When I got to college, everything shifted. College took the whole lid off. Took my first sociology class in college, started learning about class inequality and how the class that you're born into is likely to be the class that you die in, and it's not because of what you did or didn't do, it's because of the system. And that just started to dispel some of the narratives that you kind of hear growing up, that if people are poor, it's because they didn't work hard, and Black people, we don't have the same value for education, that's why we don't have the same success, and things that are not even things people are often saying, but it's kind of the narratives are in the air. And those narratives never did sit well with me, but I didn't necessarily have the language to say something different. But I got to college and I started taking these classes, and I started getting that language to understand. And so you take sociology and I'm understanding systemic inequity. Then you add on African American studies, and now I'm seeing race in a totally different way. Not only just Blackness, but even Black womanhood. I took a class on Black womanhood where I understood about the angry Black woman trope and different controlling images about Black women, and understanding our unique version of oppression, and things that used to be funny to me, like the Ratchet Girl anthem video that me and my friends used to sing along to, were no longer funny. I'm that's the caricaturization of Black women and yada, yada, yada. And, I was taking American studies classes and learning about how American culture is so individualistic, and we believe in meritocracy, but really meritocracy is just everybody gets what they deserve in life and what they work for, and just learning that that's not the case. I was learning that in my classes and through research and writing papers and exploring that, but then I was also learning that outside of classes, because I was going to these different events on campus, even during Black History Month, going to events where I'm learning about privilege, and not just racial privilege and white privilege, but the fact that I had socioeconomic privilege coming from a middle class family, that I had religious privilege belonging to the religious majority, that I had privilege for being straight, all these different things that I'm starting to learn about holistically that I just didn't necessarily know about as much growing up. And on top of that, I was starting to learn about how me and my classmates were experiencing racism on campus. So during some Black History Month talks that we did, and by the way, I was super involved in the Black community on campus. When I got to college, I was really still in that mode of being open and cool with everybody, but my experiences showed me that it wasn't necessarily socially safe to be open and cool with everybody, because I was experiencing racial microaggressions. So I made friends with this white boy on my floor, and we were having a conversation about Michelle Obama and how she experienced racism back when she was at Princeton, and that's why she doesn't come back, we think. And he was like, well, she could be a little more gracious. And I'm just you're trivializing her experiences as a Black woman, and you don't even know what she went through on Princeton's campus in the 80s. And so it's that friendship started to feel less safe. Or people that I met and made friends with before coming to Princeton who were from Michigan, one of them found out I was on the board of the Black Student Union and was don't you think the name Black Student Union is a little divisive? And it's just oh, I thought we were gonna be friends, but that's a no, because no, so it just, over time, it started to feel like making friends with Black students was more safe. And so that's where I was really building community. And at Black History Month events, we were talking, and I was learning that Black students were being racially profiled on campus by our public safety department, and being called the N-word by drunk white students at parties, and all these different things. And I just started to be wow, we're going through this stuff on campus. What can be done about this? And there was a movement kind of starting among different college students at the time called the I Too movement. And it's about saying like, I too belong on my campus. It's modeled after the Langston Hughes poem, I Too Sing America. So I think there was I Too Am Harvard, there was I Too Am Oxford. And I remember sharing a Facebook post on the Black Student Union Facebook page and being like, this is too real because I know Princeton is no different. And it got a lot of likes and some comments. And I was like, I wonder if this is something that people would be interested in doing on our campus, because the I Too movement was like a photo awareness campaign where you hold up different signs that show your experiences of racism on your campus. And so I started talking to the Black Student Union Board, and we basically started talking to students and hearing what they wanted, and decided to run a campaign to raise awareness about racism on campus. And so we went to a key campus landmark and we did a photo shoot holding up these signs, like showing our experiences with racism on campus. And this was a process, part of the process of me starting to find my voice, because I had people who led student government telling me you shouldn't do this, especially because, Princeton Preview is coming up. It's going to discourage, students of color from coming. And it's like, no, like we have to be honest about our experiences here. And hopefully students will be encouraged, at least that people are trying to do something about what's happening instead of just trying to brush it under the rug. And so that was definitely an experience in starting to find my voice. And after that campaign, that photo campaign, I got together with the vice president of the Black Student Union. I was the project manager at the time, and with the director of our multicultural center. And we started brainstorming like, okay, students are expressing all these things that they're dealing with. What can Princeton do to better serve its Black students? And so we literally wrote a whole list of demands. If I could, I probably could find the document in my computer if I looked hard enough. But we wrote a bunch of different things. We wrote about how their African American studies wasn't a department, even though you couldn't major in African American studies, even though you could major in all these other things, all these other liberal arts topics, religion and history and all these different things, Latin American studies, but you couldn't major in African American studies, even though it was the most popular certificate program, even though it had the best professors, even though the classes were so amazing. And so we wrote about that. We wrote about how there's no process to go through when you experience racism. We wrote about all these different things, and we had a whole list. But then finals hit, and that kind of fell off because finals was really kind of took us under. But I had the document, right? So table that for now. I also was finding my voice on campus because there was a big debate on campus about white privilege. There was a Republican or like a conservative newspaper on campus where this white guy basically wrote an article about why he doesn't believe in white privilege and won't apologize for white privilege. And I was super vocal about disagreeing. I was writing long Facebook statuses explaining why he just was not even understanding what privilege meant, because he was acting like saying he had privilege was like undermining his hard work and things like that. And it's like, no, that's not what that is. And so I was very vocal, and I was like, somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to say something about this. And if they do, I will totally sign on, and BSU will sign on. And it turned out that somebody was going to be me, because somehow Time, which had published this guy's article, heard about my vocal opposition to it, because I think I got interviewed for someone else's article about the topic. And they emailed me and asked if I wanted to write a response article. So I ended up writing a response article about white privilege and how he wasn't understanding what it was, and just explaining it. And it got published on Time Magazine's website, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so that was kind of a part of starting to find my voice, right? And then not only this stuff is happening on campus, right? Classes, educational events, op-eds, all these different things. But then in the community, I'm also getting more experiences doing work in the Black community, even outside of campus. I was spending all of my spring and fall breaks doing service trips, specifically this trip called the Brooklyn College Awareness Program, where we would go to New York, which wasn't far from New Jersey, and work with students on their college applications. And I just love doing that kind of stuff. I ended up going on that trip literally every fall and spring break, working with Black and brown students who didn't have the same access to college resources, and just working with them on their essays. And it was cool seeing them get into college and things like that. And I ended up leading that trip, throughout my time at Princeton, and instituting diversity training, because I experienced racism on that trip before I was a leader. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But it is relevant, but it's a longer story. Long story short, this guy that I was on the trip with literally accused me in front of everybody of being a killer, saying things like, look at her, she can scrap, and she's killed somebody, out of nowhere, presumably because I'm a Black girl from Detroit. Yeah, that happened. Anyway, so yeah, when I started leading that trip, I instituted diversity training and made sure we did not bring people on who were going to be acting like that. But anyway, in terms of also learning in community and getting passionate about these issues in community, I did a summer internship in Chicago. There was this program called Princeton Internships in Civic Service, and it would allow you to go work at like a nonprofit or something like that over the summer. And so I went after my freshman year, I went to Chicago. I was originally trying to find an internship in Detroit, but there wasn't any. Chicago's like a second home to me. It's where my dad is from. I have family there. So I was like, I can live with family. And I did an internship working with students on the west side of Chicago. I was doing like college and career readiness programming for them. I was organizing their college tour. I was mentoring them, I was supervising them, and I was doing some restorative justice work with them as well. And that was a really impactful experience because just having the year that I had of learning so much and then being in Chicago with my students and seeing all the things they were going through, it was like seeing the real world application of everything that I learned about. It's one thing to see it in Detroit when you don't have that analytical lens, and it's another thing to see it when you do. And so just seeing that was kind of like, it was really impactful. My students were telling me how they weren't learning anything in their school. I was seeing how they lost classmates to gun violence. I was seeing how they didn't feel safe walking around their communities, and it really just impacted me a lot. And I also at the same time was just falling in love with Chicago. It's a great city, and I decided I wanted to come back after graduating. And so I thought I would come back after graduating and work on, things like youth work, youth empowerment work. And a lot of that shifted because of the Black Lives Matter movement, which was about to erupt, and I didn't even know it. That summer when I was interning in Chicago, Mike Brown was killed that August. And me and all my other friends who were Black leaders on campus, we were emailing with each other back and forth, like, what are we gonna do about this? As a matter of fact, I'm gonna let this be a part one, because the Black Lives Matter movement is definitely a turning point, and I'll let the Black Lives Matter movement be part 2. So stay tuned and subscribe and like and comment and before you watch the next video.